welcome back. We are with a few of our IMB Drum Majors again, and this is our roundtable discussion part 2. So in part 1, you already learned a little bit about them, their backgrounds, and how they're all performing in the CBDNA Intercollegiate Marching Band virtual performance. So today, let's dive into the discussion about school traditions and how some bands had a little bit of a marching season, even though it was different this year. So to start us off talking about traditions, let's go with Laura.
Sure thing. So even though my band didn't get to march this year, I'd have to say that one of my favorite things about being in the Sun Devil Marching Band is how we come in for pregame on game days. So behind me actually is the stadium. One of our traditions for coming in pregame is we all pack into the Pat Tillman Tunnel, which is on that side of the stadium. It's really cramped in there, really hot. Everybody's really sweaty because it's like 110 degrees here in Arizona and Tempe. But there's so much like great energy in the air. And so before we come out on the field, there's a hype video that's played for our band with really intense music on the in the stadium monitor screen. And then the bass drum hits and everybody screams in the tunnel. There's so much excitement and energy in there, and everybody runs out onto the field. And it's such a great experience and a very bonding experience too with my band members. And I think that's one of my favorite moments of being in the Sun Devil Marching Band.
My favorite tradition that we have at Westchester University in the Incomparable Golden Rams Marching Band is actually our dismissal tradition. It stems back from a really famous college band director named George Parks. He was the former band director of the Minutemen Marching Band at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and he was an alumni of Westchester University, as well as starting the George M. Parks Drum Major Academy. And he had a saying that he said a lot, and it was "Eyes with Pride." And that's kind of the mantra of our band. It's one of those sayings that really ties our band together. So at the end of everything we do, whether it's a rehearsal, a game day, a performance, anything like that, one of the drum majors gives 4 claps and says "eyes" while clapping through. So it goes "eyes with pride," and the entire band says "with pride" while snapping to attention from standby. It's one of those great little things that we do to wrap up everything we do that just reminds us to carry ourselves with pride, to carry our band with pride. And it's just a really chilling and amazing experience. The first time I got to do it, I actually cried a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. My first time doing it as drum major, it was just, it's an incredible tradition. It's just one of those things that really brings us all together as a band.
Has a few traditions, and hey everybody, my name is Jawada, and one of the traditions that we do is our mascot is a monarch, which is a like royalty lion. So there's like a big statue in the middle of one of our buildings, and we like rub the belly for good luck. Another one is when we go around playing during tailgates to hype up the crowds and bringing the football team. And then another tradition I love is when it's after the game of homecoming. So after we do our parade and then we come back, we officially announce our freshmen or first year people and officially bring them into the family, and they're official members of the Monarch Band. And they get like a little pin, and we have like a whole pinning ceremony and everything.
Hi. I wouldn't say this is so much as a tradition, but something that happens every year. We host our NAU Band Day, and it's just so incredible to finish a show and you see all these high school kids watching you and they can truly appreciate the arts. It's really different from a football game where they're just kind of watching you, and high school band kids are there to see you perform. And it's just, I remember the first time we finished our show and we snapped our horns down and they just went crazy. And it's really an incredible feeling. So I love doing that band day. And we always wake up at like 2 a.m. and go to IHOP. So it's a crazy start to the day.
All right, this is Grant. So a few traditions that we have that I really like is actually before the game starts, we have mini jag bands, basically like Jaguar marching band, jag bands. We have little bands mini bands that are going to go around the football stadium and play for the fans before games. This year we actually couldn't do that because of COVID, and this is actually our first year with a stadium on campus. Before we had a campus, we didn't have a stadium on campus. We had one about 25 minutes from campus where the Reese's Senior Bowl was played in Mobile. So we actually had our first experience in a stadium. So I'm excited in years to come for new experiences, new traditions that we create with that new stadium.
That's amazing. That's definitely a feeling that I think a lot of people can't relate to with the new stadium and everything. So I can't imagine how amazing that feeling is stepping in there for the first time. So along with traditions comes a lot of memorable experiences and moments. How we kind of heard from you guys. And this year has definitely taken a turn in marching band terms as well, because you've had to create new memories and almost new traditions in a sense. So I want to hear from you guys how your seasons went along, because I know some of you had marching seasons where you could be in person. Some people did virtual things, but I want to hear how it all came together, because you guys are from all different parts of the US. So I'm sure that it came together very differently from all of you. So Claire, how about you start us off? Tell us a little bit about how your marching season went this year.
Yeah, for sure. So in the Big 12, at least, we weren't allowed to be on the field at all. We were lucky enough to be able to still go to games and be in person. We just had to be in the stands the whole time. So that it kind of allowed for new opportunities that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. We have 350 people in one end zone of the stadium. Normally we would have our director or one of our drum majors conducting at a time, and that's it. You'd only have one. When we actually have 4 drum majors, we have 2 head drum majors and 2 assistant drum majors every year. And so this year, since the band was so spread out and since there were just so many people, we actually had a cool opportunity of having all of us conduct for most of the entire game. We still did our little tradition things, where drum majors would take over in the 3rd or 4th quarter, things of that nature. But for the most part, everybody was conducting the whole time. And so it was really, really cool to be able to conduct and, lead the band in that way with, my assistant drum major and my co-head drum major all at the same time, and did with TAs and all that kind of, it was just like a really neat bonding experience for all of us, when everything changed and when so many of our traditions weren't able to happen. It was cool to be able to kind of create something new.
So for Millersville, we didn't have a football season this year, but we still kept rehearsing throughout the season. We started off originally with the woodwinds rehearsing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Woodwinds were on Tuesdays, brass were on Thursdays, and eventually that just didn't work out because we got 3 weeks in and the Thursday people just had no rehearsals yet because of weather. So we had 2 rehearsals a week with the entire band, and we had 2 performances this year. One was halfway through the season, and that was for the front ensemble and the battery, and they got to perform the pieces that they had been working on so far over the season. We had that open to Millersville University students to come and watch in the stands. We also had it live streamed, and then our second performance was for the entire band. We got to play some of our pep tunes. We got to play our field show, even though we didn't march for any of it. And it was a really cool experience because during that performance was when all of us found out that we had made it into the IMB. We were on the field and our director came up over the system and he just announced it and everybody got super excited. And it was just a really cool way to find out that we had been chosen for such an amazing opportunity. And yeah, it was really good. We made the most of it that we could.
Hey everyone, Chris again. So like Claire mentioned before, as part of like the Big 12, we weren't able to be on the field at all. We had to conduct all activity from the stands. Thinking about it, like at the very beginning of the season, I thought like, how is this like all gonna work? And of course, like distancing and stuff, like how are we gonna make that work? Because you're usually compact with like hundreds of members in the stands. But we were able to pull through it. We made markings like each like 6 feet apart for all the members. We also had PPE. It's like protective equipment that we put on like the bells, playable masks that all the members did. And even with those, I guess, kind of like barriers, they all sounded really, really good and decent. And yeah, speaking as someone who's like never been a drum major before, this was my first experience. It is definitely something that I will never forget just because of like the uniqueness of it all. And yes, given our season was unique, it was also really brief. We started typical like in August, but then we only made it to about like the beginning or half of October. And then in El Paso, that's when our cases started to get really out of control. So we were like, okay, for the safety of everyone, we're gonna stay at home. And during that, we mainly conducted like a lot of Zoom meetings. We had a bunch of kind of master classes. Our director would bring in people from all over the country, talk about different aspects of marching band, such as like drill design, like how to pick a show, like stuff you have to think when you're like gonna become like a director and like that's your baby now. But yeah, even though it was brief and short and it wasn't the typical like standard game days, protocols, all that, it was still something really unique and an experience that I will never forget.
And kind of similar to what Chris and Claire said, at OU, we're also in the Big 12, so we weren't allowed on the field at all during games or anytime on game days. And we had a bunch of PPE that we had to wear. We had our masks with slits in them. We had bell covers. You had to be wearing those and have those on at all times. And we only had 80 people in a pep band per game. So our usual band size is 325. But for each game that we played, we'd take a quarter of the band, and that we'd be able to space out and be, 6 feet away from everybody. And that was how we made use of it. So instead of everyone getting to be at every game, now we have a quarter of the band at each game. And then our seniors got to be there for our final game of the season when we played Baylor on senior night. I think the kind of the wildest two things that we had happen this year was, first of all, without being able to be on the field, we actually recorded our shows, and we got to record our shows in the stadium, which was cool. On Thursday nights, we'd have our recording sessions. We get the whole band out there in our big, COVID safe block, and we'd start recording, and we'd get the chance to show those on the video screens at halftime of the football games, which was really, really neat. And also, OU hosted College Game Day for the Bedlam game when we played Oklahoma State, and that looked a lot different than usual with because usually they've got the big fan pit and everything, but with COVID protocols, they actually just set up in the stadium, and the only people in the stadium for the game day show was the band and the spirit squad. So we actually got to be there playing the game day crew in and out of breaks. We got to be there cheering them on and watching the show, and that was one of the most unique experiences that I've certainly ever had. Being able to actually be there and watch the game day festivities up close, because we had never had College Game Day in Norman, at least not in the last decade. And so being able to see that up close, where it's kind of just an interesting setting with just us and Reese Davis and Kirk Herbstreit and all those guys, was really, really, really sweet to get to experience firsthand.
Hey, it's Victor again from Clemson. So being in the ACC, similar to everybody else, we weren't allowed to be on the field. So before the season started, we kind of had, some discussions, and we ended up going with a format where we'd post, we were able to practice together after doing Zoom for about the first month. And so we'd create our videos, our halftime videos with drill and everything. And we'd post those on YouTube, and we'd have recordings of us playing with those for the YouTube. But now when it came to in the stadium, we had just the visual of the shows going on over the big screen, and we were able to play along with that. So during halftime, it still felt like we were performing. And if you're familiar with Clemson and the stadium, we have the hill. So we were blessed with the opportunity to be able to put the band on the hill. We weren't able to fit everybody, but probably about 80%, 75 to 80% of the 350 of us were able to be there. So instead of being in the stands, we were kind of, usually the students are there. So we actually, for most of us, it was the first time having the typical student experience of being on the hill for the game. And especially for the beginning, when the team's running down in between us now instead of us just looking on, it was a pretty amazing experience. And we're just glad that we were able to be there and cheer on the team for all the home games.
For Florida A&M, in our experience, we weren't allowed to have any games. We had no football season whatsoever for the MEAC. Being in Florida, especially, the virus was pretty rampant. So early on, we made sure we had no pre-drill. That's where we host like our band camp activities and really get the freshmen up to speed. We started off that first month with just 2 practices a week. It wasn't until after that first month we started to 3 practices a week. But within that time, we actually were able to perform and record for Pepsi and do like a homecoming type of performance through them. And then we recorded with Ty Tribbett. He's a gospel artist. And we had our gospel choir also perform with him and us. During that time, every time we had practice, it was sign-in sheets and temperature checks. Everybody had masks on all the time, walking in and out. We weren't allowed to touch our band room, only to get uniforms for those performances, and it was very few people that actually were able to do the performances. But we were able still, by the end of the season, we had 2 YouTube performances, and we had a parade for the voting for November 3rd, and we had like a little rally for a parade to the polls, as they said. So we were able to do a couple things, and by the end of the season, that last performance that's on YouTube, it was such a great quality sound that we're still able to maintain and produce, even without being in the band room and having those everyday practices.
So for Temple, very similar to what many of you have said, we were not allowed to step on the field at all. The American Conference actually never canceled our games, so we knew that there was going to be a season, but we didn't really know how involved we were going to be. And one of our greatest hurdles personally is that Temple University is located right in the heart of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is a major metropolitan city on the East Coast. So while our state had restrictions for, just different COVID guidelines, the city of Philadelphia had even stricter guidelines for what we needed to follow, and not having our own stadium and playing at Lincoln Financial Field where the Eagles play, we also had to follow their guidelines, and it was so challenging. It wasn't until 2 weeks before our band camp that we even were confirmed that we could rehearse and we could be together as a band. So logistically, that took a lot to coordinate. And in order to do so, we were only allowed to have 50 of our 200 plus members together at a time. And that includes all musicians, leadership, and any type of additional executive leadership, like the drum majors, TAs, our band director. So figuring out how the heck we were going to have all of those people and still have band and only have 50 people at a time was so challenging. But once we figured it out and kind of made a rotating schedule, it ended up working out. In about October, I believe it was, we were actually able to raise how many people we could have at a time, and we're able to have 100 members on the field at a time, which was so exciting because 50 people is basically what we have as a small group for, traveling events and whatnot, like some of you have mentioned. So once we went from 50 to 100, it was incredible. It felt like the band tripled in size. It was amazing. We were only allowed to go to one football game in early November, and we took about 100 people. Again, it was all in the stands. It was super weird. There was no type of pregame, type of ritual, anything like that. But we were fortunate that since we were able to practice together throughout the season, we were still able to produce a show for every game that Temple was able to play at this season. So the one game that we were at, we recorded everything, music and drill, and had a full edited video. We had an amazing student video committee that produced and filmed all of our shows and edited everything that was played on the screen at the football games and live streamed to our families and all of our Temple fans. And the video was played on the Jumbotron, and we were able to play along in the stands, which was cool. So it wasn't like playing on the field, but it was like having a performance in the stadium, which was really great. We were unfortunately never able to have the full band together to all play together. So once all of the hard work towards those shows was completed and we were able to see the final product of the video, it was just really special because that was really our only opportunity to see all 200 of us all together on the field at a time. So it was definitely a season that I will never forget, that's for sure.
I'm so glad that all of you who had a season were able to experience something a little bit different. That's incredible that there's you could do performances that weren't even necessarily through the school. So that was so awesome to hear, especially because who knows if that would have been a normal opportunity if we wouldn't be in the times that we are now. So there is good out of bad. So I'm glad that you guys got to experience some good out of it. So thank you guys so much for sharing your traditions with me and sharing all of how your season went and everything like that. We have one more part coming for everybody, so make sure you follow Intercollegiate MB so you don't miss that. And for other marching arts, make sure you check out Style Plus TV, and they can also be found on social media at styleplus_band. So we will see you guys soon. Bye.